Today's video is about bells. Bells are strangely controversial on bicycles, especially when it comes to shared cycle paths, such as Canal towpaths. In fact, I can't open a Facebook, YouTube video, or even my own videos without somebody putting comments in there about the use of bells. And people find bells incredibly rude and offensive, and some people find them indispensable. So who's right, who's wrong? So without any further ado, let's get into this and talk about bells. Okay, so here we are. So I never thought as a full-grown man I'm going to be making a video on bells, but oh my god, nothing causes more controversy in my videos is if somebody perceives me of not using a bell or using a bell. Honestly, I get told off either way, but also as well, I get it in real life all the time. So I think a great place to start with this video is Google AI, because this is how lazy I'm getting with my research now. But let's just ask Google AI, what does a bell ring on a bicycle mean? A fairly simple question which you think most people would understand, but we'll get into why people don't. Okay, this is what Google AI has to say about bells on bikes. A bicycle bell is a warning to other road users such as pedestrians, cyclists and drivers that a cyclist is approaching or passing. It serves as a polite but attention-grabbing sound to alert people to the cyclist's presence, helping prevent surprise and potential accidents, especially on shared paths or crowded areas. While the highway code may not mandate them, bells are often a legal requirement for cyclists in many places and are crucial safety tools. Yeah, bells are not a legal requirement in the UK on bicycles. However, it is required that shops, when they do supply bicycles or sell them, that they do install them with a bell. Actually, Rule 66 of the Highway Code strongly recommends the use and implementation of bells. But if you're in Northern Ireland or the Isle of Man, they are a legal requirement. So there you go, bells. That's interesting. And also on most cycle paths or canal tow paths, 2 dings of a bell while passing, long before passing, is the recommendation. In fact, it's clearly signposted on many canals and towpaths. So with that, that's the end of the video. Job done, no more debate. Goodbye. Alright, of course we're not going to end it there because unfortunately the debate does ring on. Pun not intended. Sorry. So I'll admit my attitude towards bells has shifted over the course of a year. Very early on in the year, I opted to use my voice. Using a voice is a totally acceptable way of letting somebody know you're coming, especially if you're going very slowly. And that's how I personally chose to approach things early on. However, the longer distances I started covering, I found that to be not a very practical way of negotiating the canals, and I started to transition more towards bell use. Now, this, to some people, this might seem totally sane. Other people will be enraged now that I didn't use my bell at all times. And there are lots of places where I use bells pretty much constantly now, such as when I'm going under bridges or going around blind corners.
Also, great placement for a skip. I was just saying, great placement for a skip, that isn't it?
That's a perfect example of why you need to use your bell at blind corners. But I digress. Where was I up to? Oh yeah, the controversy about bells. Quite often when we're out cycling and we're mixing with other people, do you think those people have read the codes for the cycle paths that they're walking on, or the cycle path they're walking on in the middle of town? Are they aware of why a bell is used? Culturally, these things can mean one thing, whereas in law they mean another. So let's talk about real world scenarios. So to try and highlight a real world scenario, I met up these 2 characters and then kind of a combination of some of the people I meet on the canal towpath. And I don't know about you, whenever I meet somebody who's a little bit unpleasant on the canal towpath, I kind of give them like a little backstory in my head. So yeah, here we go. This is Terry. Terry enjoys wearing sports clothes but doesn't participate in any sports at all. And one day, for whatever reason, it's a nice sunny day, Terry decides, do you know what, I'm going to go for a walk on the canal. He throws on his noise-cancelling headphones and heads out onto the canal. Along you come and you see Terry walking down the middle of the towpath. So you give Terry the customary 2 dings of a bell, thinking Terry will make a little room, allow you to pass, and you both can carry on with your day. However, what you don't know about Terry is a walking ball of insecurity. Any kind of ring from a bike bell is like a challenge to his manhood, and you have just thrown down the gauntlet of battle. Terry turns round and refuses to let you pass and gives you a right earful. I think we've all met somebody like this, that even though a bell is meant to be a polite and friendly way to get somebody's attention, there are some people who just don't take it that way. In fact, when I was doing the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, by the way, I would recommend you do that ride if you ever want to do it. It's fantastic. On the second day, I did it over 2 days. On the second day, I was going through the very touristy area, going through like Skipton, and it happened to fall on a weekend. And I met loads of people like this, to the point where it started to wear me down a little bit. I'd camped the night before, I was tired, I was carrying all this camping gear and all my equipment, so my tolerance for this kind of thing was a little bit lower, and I thought, while I'm going through the busy, really busy touristy areas, I'll just start saying good morning. That's where I met the next hypothetical character. John runs the local walking group. Whenever he heads out onto the canal, even though it's only 5 minutes from his house, he doesn't leave without a compass and a map. Why? Because John is always prepared. John knows every rule, every bylaw, and John certainly knows that cyclists should be ringing their bell twice. Now, he's not a fan of cyclists, but he will tolerate them as long as they follow the rules. Along I come after being berated heavily for ringing my bell, and have the audacity to slowly come up behind John and say good morning to him. He doesn't jump, he's not startled, anything like that. John is filled with indignant rage. He turns around and starts to berate me for not using my bell, and he gives me a right earful. I think we've all met these characters, and I think we've all dealt with these people. And there are other real-world factors to consider when using a bell, and one of those is a very real and present issue, and that is hearing loss. A common misconception about hearing loss is when people lose their hearing, it's kind of like somebody's turned the volume down on the world, and with some conditions that can be the case, but in all of us, every human that's ever existed, we are all losing our hearing in a very specific way. We're actually losing frequency. We're losing the high tones. That means what we can hear is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. Here's a great example, something that we can probably all relate to. When I was younger, I was fully aware that we lost hearing in frequency, and one of the things I really cherished listening to was bats. I'd go out, sit in the garden, listen to bats, and I knew there would be a day when I wouldn't be able to hear it, so it's something I paid a lot of attention to, because bats make a noise on a frequency, well, in the UK anyway, that's very high, and as we lose our hearing, usually by the time we get into our 30s, we lose the sound of bats, and it's something I paid very close attention to, and I think I lost bats around about my late 30s, so I managed to hang in there pretty well. Now, when I go out and sit in the garden with my son and he listens to the bats, he can hear them just fine, but I can't hear them at all. Like, literally, I just have to tell him I can, because he doesn't understand why I can't hear the bats. It's because I'm old. The older you get, the more pronounced this issue gets. And that means that sometimes when you're ringing your bell at somebody, your bell's on a frequency that person just can't hear anymore. I think we've all kind of experienced this scenario where you've been ringing your bell at somebody and there's just zero reaction, and you come up behind them and you say good morning or hello or excuse me, and they jump out of their skin like they can hear you just perfectly fine and actually turn around and get quite angry with you. But that's probably because your bell is on a frequency they just cannot hear. This is a very real world scenario, but there are also other reasons people can't hear certain frequencies. Earlier on we mentioned noise cancelling headphones, and they all work slightly differently, and they also block certain frequencies. Some are better than others, some are just deadly because you can't hear anything that's going on in the world around you, but that also means that bells, people can't hear them. Now I know already in the comments somebody's already furiously typing, and please do, by the way, furiously type, it really helps the channel out. Somebody's typing that, well, they just shouldn't do this. Somebody shouldn't go on a cycle path with headphones on. Yeah, they shouldn't, but unfortunately they do. So what are the options available to us as cyclists? What can we do? Well, I don't think there's any one good answer to this, but one of the things we maybe shouldn't do, although it's hilarious and I've seen this, is go for an obnoxiously loud bell. The problem is that if that bell's on a frequency that people can't hear, it doesn't matter how loud it is. If they have hearing loss that prevents them from hearing that frequency, they're not going to hear it anyway, and you're just going to antagonize people that can hear it because it's obnoxiously loud. Although some of the funniest videos I've watched have people going around blasting people with air horns who are walking in cycle lanes in city centres, although side effects do include getting punched in the face. So again, I kind of always come back to this, and I think in the UK it is a cultural thing. It's crazy when you go around the world and you see how other people use bells and people respect cycle paths and cycle lanes. In fact, whilst I was in Austria, I noticed people rung their bells to tell people off who stepped into the cycle lane. I know it's kind of weird it's a very difficult distinction to make. For example, when I was in Vienna, I would notice somebody mindlessly step into the cycle path who was clearly Austrian, or to my eyes was Austrian anyway, and then kind of realise the mistake they'd made, they realised them the cycle path and get out of it instantly, and then a cyclist would still come by and give them a couple of dings like you know, very naughty. Austrians love to tell each other off for things and tell people off. They love the rules. But yeah, it was very interesting to see that culturally, you know, it's kind of very much ingrained in the people that this is a cycle path. It's just obvious. If you're in a cycle path, you need to be mindful. If you're in a cycle lane, bikes are going to be in there. In the UK, some people almost seem shocked to see bikes on a cycle path. There is a huge amount of ignorance, arrogance, and we've got to try and negotiate that as cyclists, unfortunately, and we will never get it right. And I don't think even fellow cyclists are going to agree on this video anywhere. I think some are clearly going to be in the bell camp no matter what, regardless. Some people won't use a bell and will only want to really use their voice. I think for me, I am, like I said, majority bell use, but I do acknowledge that using your voice, you know, is okay in certain scenarios. Cycling awareness courses for children, they're absolutely amazing. They're doing such great work. Even if those people grow up and don't continue to cycle, at least they will have that memory, that knowledge of what you should be doing. I see the Canal and River Trust taking children on walks up and down the canal quite regularly, and they even pointed me out as an example, saying actually that's an example of somebody using a bike on a towpath. So I think that's great. I think it's a cultural change, and something needs to change in the culture, and it involves awareness, compassion, consideration to others. Unfortunately today feels like that's in low supply, but I remain forever optimistic and ever hopeful. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you on the next one. All right, thank you very much. Bye bye, bye bye, bye bye, bye, bye bye. Where's the dog gone? Oh, there you are. Hello, Rippers.